Right. Hey guys, we're back for another episode of HyperFix Breakdown. I feel like more and more is going on. I'm having trouble figuring out what to talk about because there's so much to talk about. And this week is officially the week spring starts. We've got the spring equinox on Friday. So I just feel like at spring break, I feel like we're shifting into like a new season where people are really starting to notice the threats and also really taking AI into their own hands. I've had more people reach out to me in the last 2 weeks wanting to use AI tools, wanting to start newsletters than I have so far this year. So people are coming out of hibernation. They're realizing, oh, how do I do this? I think it just goes back to say, like, we think everyone's kind of in this headspace, but a lot of people are just, coming into it. So wanted to talk today about a few things. And one thing that's just been on my mind, I messaged you guys as soon as I saw it, was the McKinsey hack. And for anyone who has like no idea or like, I don't want to be one of those newsletters or shows that are just like, and this was the data breach this week. And this is I don't want to be that. But here's why I think this one's really important. McKinsey is one of the largest consulting companies in the entire world. They have been spotlighted and highlighted as the model for how consulting firms can adapt in the AI space. They have helped clients adapt as well. They have created all of these agents who do everything from consulting for that, but like to supplement their consulting, to build workflows, strategic insights, to monitor certain industries, to make them essentially better at what they do. And not only that, you can like McKinsey talks about this. They're hosting webinars about how they've adapted AI and how they're helping their clients do the same. Well, because I work in consulting, we all do, right? Because we run Spiral, which is more than consulting, but consulting is such a big part of what we do. I'm like, wow, I think anyone who's in the consulting space should be paying attention with the hack that just happened, McKinsey. And because I'm not as tech savvy as Xavier, I was hoping that Xavier could kind of break down what happened. So
Yeah.
we have a platform called Lily. I understand it was actually named after one of their former like female employees, which I thought was cool. But it's used by 43,000 employees. And there was a data breach, which I understand that the API keys were exposed. I'm not sure how, but what happened was a hacker gained access to 46 million internal chat messages, almost a million file uploads, and 57,000 user accounts. They got access to the internal AI assistants and the system prompts that control their AI. So that is shocking. And like these trade secrets are really so valuable. All of this information so valuable. And what I understand from reading about it is that the vulnerability was a SQL injection bug in a public API endpoint. I don't really understand what that means. And Xavier, I was hoping that you could break it down and also explain what this means for anyone who has an agency or of any kind and they're creating agents for their internal processes that impact their clients.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not gonna really go too deep into it. It was a SQL injection. SQL is like a language for managing databases. Pretty much like 80 or 90% of the internet, some crazy amount like that, is probably running off of SQL or some flavor of it. So this could happen to basically any large enterprise, any small startup. Something that I told you when you sent this is that is not surprising to me because McKinsey is a consulting firm. They're not a technology firm and they're definitely not a security firm. So even though they should have like probably some of the best practices you would think they would have, they really don't because that's not what they do for a business. They are consultants. They're not security engineers. And it's possible that the thing that was breached probably wasn't even built by someone at McKinsey. That was probably outsourced to like a software engineering consultancy. So you have to keep that in mind as well. Even though McKinsey's going to take the blame for it because it was their systems, it happened on their time, their watch. It was probably someone that they outsourced something to that had this bug there that they didn't realize. So that's kind of my take on that. I think this applies to not just McKinsey and just consulting firms. This goes back to the topic we had last week about how companies don't have policies set up around how their employees should use and give information to these systems. We're basically circling back to that. Any company, all of them have employees that are using these AI systems, whether they have been approved or not. And I'm guarantee you majority of them have something similar, if not some other type of bug that is very easily exposed if someone went to go dig. I think with this one, this person like made it a point to try to find something. If anyone did that to any system, they're going to find something. It's kind of how that works.
Yeah. But I think this is also highlighting again, as we move into this where we're all adopting AI and using AI agents, and, you were mentioning the policy, I think it's becoming more clear that you've actually got to hire a security expert in-house now to really oversee all of this because it's just getting to a point where it's too big. And like you're saying, consultant agencies, they are not experts in cybersecurity. And so they can't oversee that. And so before, where they were really relatively certain that all their data was, just kept in one secure little spot, it's no longer being done that way because of everyone using AI. So the question is, when are people going to now start hiring their own in-house cybersecurity consultants, and whether they keep them, in-house or, just have a cybersecurity consulting firm to, overlook things and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I guess that's probably where things are going to have to go. You're going to just have to have so much more budget and oversight for just managing your security online now.
I would imagine that McKinsey has both in-house security as well as some kind of like third-party auditing firm. They probably have a whole team whose job it is. They call it red teaming in tech. So
Okay.
with security, you have red teams and blue teams. Blue teams are trying to protect the system. Red teams are trying to break in. So a lot of these companies actually pay people to try to hack all day long, try to hack the systems. The thing of it is, there's this overlap between AI and security that I feel like there's a specialization that needs to happen
Yeah.
specifically around AI security, autonomous security, because that's a lot different than someone writing a script or just sitting at their computer trying to brute force their way into your system. This is
Yeah.
an autonomous agent that can run 24/7. And then you have all of this software now that's being built, like something like 50 to 60 or maybe even 80% of software at this point is being built by AI. And a lot of it is not being instructed to build it in a secure fashion. So
Mm-mm.
there's a lot to think about there. I think a lot of companies are going to be having data breaches around AI systems, or that's being done by an AI system. So I don't think this is going to necessarily stop.
Can you explain more about API keys?
Yeah.
Let's just do a one-on-one real quick. This is something that we work through with our clients. When we build agents. API keys for everything is one of the the first things that we need. And a lot of people, yeah, they don't really understand how to use them or protect them. And it seems like the most straightforward thing. Can you just break
Yeah.
that down?
So the best way to think of an API key, think of an API key like a thumbprint to your iPhone, like biometric login. So
Yeah.
basically, different companies give you access to their data. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Airbnb, tons of other companies that you never even think about that give data for maps, give data for emergency services. I mean, there are tons of companies that give access to data. And basically, the API key is a unique identifier saying that you're the one that's requesting the data from this company. So they do it for a few reasons. First, of course, is security. They don't want anyone to just have access to the API data. The other thing is limiting. So how do they know how much data you're siphoning from them services, and how can they turn it off or limit it without knowing who you are? So that's another thing, identification. If you go and do something malicious with the API, they know who did that. So
Yeah.
it's a lot around security access. If shit hits the fan, for lack of better words, a way to point a finger at who did it. So that's kind of what API keys are.
So having client API keys in the Google Drive folder, that's a
It's
no.
yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
so is there like, in terms of how valuable API keys are, like, is there a lot of attacks and phishing and like things going on to try to define these API keys so they can be.
Yeah, they're very valuable. Think about if you're just from a region, Iran, Syria, Korea, where there's like tariffs or like embargoes on your country. You can't get access to like a Google Maps API key. For all the US government knows, you want to use it to locate valuable infrastructure to plan an attack or something. So some people have API access limited based off region. Some of them have them limited based off the industry they're in. Like if you're into gambling or firearms, sometimes you might be limited based off that. We can go on and on and on and on. They're very valuable for many reasons, for bad actors, for people who just don't have access, who maybe want to build something legitimate, but they have to go through like a black or a gray market to get API key access because their country is barred from accessing it. There's tons of reasons why you would want to do it. It's like asking why you would want to use a VPN. It's like there's many reasons why that would be useful, you know? So kind of same thing applies here.
Okay. Yeah, so the agent detected the flaw by analyzing error messages from the database, then ran multiple probing attempts until it successfully accessed real production data. Pretty technical for me, but basically it says because they had access, write access, they could have modified system prompts, would have totally changed how the AI behaves, the outputs, all of that, which is like, it could be really manipulated in terms of, you think of all the kinds of industries and what this information is being used for. That's pretty serious.
Yeah, and it's a problem I think is going to happen a lot, especially with, I think McKinsey is not the only one. I'm pretty sure there has been another consulting company, if not all of them, have probably had data breaches of the same effect, probably just not to this scale. So this one makes headlines because they just had so much access to the McKinsey systems. But I'm pretty sure PwC, Deloitte, Bain and Co., like some of these other consulting agencies, I'm pretty sure they probably had low-level ones have happened before. The McKinsey one is just a big deal because it was just so many. And then, like you said, McKinsey is not only one of, it might be the biggest consulting company. Like they work with everyone from BlackRock to Goldman Sachs to all the other players in the industry.
I do understand that they fixed this like very quickly. So it's not still exposed. And I would imagine that this is pretty bad press for them though. Like I think any big company having these kind of breaches when it becomes public, if it leaks, the media is picking up on it, people on X are talking about it. This could be very damaging for the company's reputation.
You
So
would,
I
you
think
would
that's something to think of too, is in terms of safeguarding your brand.
You would think so. And for a lot of us, it would be. But one thing about the big four consulting companies, so McKinsey, Bain, PwC, Deloitte, a lot of times the big Fortune 500 companies hire them as kind of like the person to point the finger at if things don't go right. So like the upper management doesn't make the decision. They offload the decision to McKinsey. So if something wrong happens, they don't have to take the blame. They can blame McKinsey and just swap them out for a different big four consulting company. And eventually they'll end up cycling back to McKinsey. So I think it is a thing. Yes, you're right. But behind closed doors, a lot of the big companies, that's why they like using the consulting companies, because someone else can make the decision and take all the blame when things go wrong. So the companies that enlisted McKinsey, as you see, no one's really talking about them, but they're probably just as much at stake about this as McKinsey. Like it's not just McKinsey who's at fault for this, you know?
Okay.
Yeah. And do you think this is going to make a case of, because I know something else that we talk about a lot is, local AI. You know, is it possible for companies to move more of their AI agent needs to local AI in order to mitigate these risks? Or,
Absolutely. This is how much of corporate software has worked for decades. It was what they call on-prem or on-premise. Like you had your own servers at your company headquarters or somewhere else. Over the last 2 decades, we made this big push from having on-prem to using cloud servers from AWS, Google, Facebook, etc. But I think the big meta going forward is going to be reverting back to on-prem. There's companies that have already started doing that before AI, just because they realized there were so many benefits to managing their own infrastructure, like in-house. And I think now that, and we'll get into this later about like the whole like local AI thing, that kind of revolution is kind of happening. I think you're going to see a lot of companies and just a lot of people having some kind of compute at home that they're running their own software apps, et cetera, off of.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think that's, that just makes sense from just so many avenues to prevent this from happening and to also create, regain customer trust again after a breach like this. You would have to just radically change the way you store data again, and yeah, you've just got to be so much more, I guess, tight with all of your systems to just patch all the holes. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
the local AI thing is definitely the way to go, it sounds like.
But then at that point, all of the data, all the security, all the updates, that's all on your plate now. So that is the benefit of using a cloud provider. You get the aggregate benefit of everyone's data being in a cloud and need it to be secure. And like you're outsourcing that to one or two or three people versus if each individual organization or person had their own local AI, their own local servers. Now all of us have to be security experts. We all have to learn how to lock down our systems. And it's actually easier to hack into like a local server than it is a cloud server.
Yeah, because this.
Yeah. It's like there's like pros and cons to both. So there's no like perfect solution, you know?
Yeah, because I think, yeah, because then also, for those of us who all, we all work remotely, like how do you,
Yeah.
now you using your company information and now that, you're accessing their servers from abroad, it's, again, there's the VPN thing. There's, like, so,
Yeah.
it just creates again, yeah, like another sort of nightmare, I think, that people were experiencing when people originally went home, started working remotely, I think like during the pandemic and stuff. And like you say, those bigger companies like, Google or whatever, they invest so much money in the security and that kind of thing. And like as a single company, you just can't compete with that, I guess.
Yeah. And all that can get blown away by one employee going to a Starbucks and just hopping on open open Wi-Fi without a VPN. Like you can have all the security protocols you want, but if one person in your organization doesn't follow them, the
Mm,
whole house can fall. So it's like
right.
it's a touchy subject, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
One thing that comes up to me, like, well, there's two things for me when I think about these recurrent themes. Every week it's like whose data was exposed. And one is this speed, right? So the whole capitalistic model runs off of cheap and fast. And AI is moving very fast. We know this. I think it's going to like companies that are jumping on and doing a lot with it and building their agents, they are getting ahead.
Mm,
But I believe if they're not doing it correctly, they're going to get ahead in the short term. And I think what we can all agree on at Spiral is that we're taking like a more methodical approach. We recognize that the whole world is in the next 3 to 5 years is going to be very different than the one that we live in now. We've been building our own agents consistently and improving them for about a year at this point for email newsletter curation. A lot of has changed in that time. So what's coming to me is I think that companies, agencies that are not getting caught in this AI race model and are actually going to do things more, they're more focused on doing things the right way and thinking about implications in terms of how we protect client data. Like they're thinking about ethical implications, how do we think about our use to the environment, planet? They're going to really stand out. And so, like, it's about longevity. There's going to be some people jumping in, doing things with AI to make a quick buck. That's always going to exist in any kind of industry, especially kind of a gold rush happening. The other thing I see with companies that are going to do really well, again, I don't want to keep every week the OpenAI, Anthropic, like what's going on there. The I think what we're seeing, I think Anthropic right now is a good case study in ethical marketing and how people are really aligning with ethics. And, I don't know everything going on behind the scenes at Anthropic. I don't want to be the one to say, like, they're the good guys, turned down the 200 million DoD contract, and they were willing to take a hit of being a supply chain risk while OpenAI, like, jumped all over that, like, white on rice, as we say in the South. But you can see how this is playing out in the media and you can see just user data. People are gravitating more towards Anthropic. and Claude. And that's not just, the vibe. There were uninstalls of ChatGPT increased by 295% on February 8th. February, end of January was like is a month, I think, where things just really ramped up in terms of consumer awareness about the difference of ChatGPT and Claude and the different value alignment with the companies. It started with a Super Bowl ad where Anthropic just slayed OpenAI by making fun of them with the advertisements that they were incorporating. But, I think this I'm making a point here in that you don't have to follow exactly what Anthropic's doing, but there's something that's resonating in the culture with the perception that a company is more ethical. And to me, this looks like it's going to be more important for people versus speed and things being cheap. I don't know. We'll see, because we're very wired as consumers to want that. A lot of people have the ick with AI already, and they are looking for more sustainable, thoughtful, ethical companies. Like, okay, if I got to get on one of these boats, which is the best one to get on if this is the way the world's going? So that's is a big takeaway I have from the McKinsey thing. And I'm way more comfortable than ever in going slower and getting it right and looking at longevity. We've had several conversations about this because it's very tempting that we see opportunities everywhere, every day, where we could just jump in and like build an agent real quick and solve somebody's problems. But that's not necessarily going to be the best business model going forward.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely, intentional use, I think, is the word I think is more and more how I think about it. Is we've just got to be very intentional so that we go slow, protect ourselves and obviously client data, and really make sure that we have the oversight we need to so that we don't lose track of what the AI agents are doing. Because I think that's very easy to do, especially for people who are not who don't have the technical knowledge. Like Xavier, you have the technical knowledge to really know exactly what's going on at every step. But, people who are using this, they don't. And so I think slow and intentional with a lot of oversight and really questioning at every, what assumptions is it making? The discernment, the judgment of a human oversight, I think is going to be crucial in order to just roll it out in a way that is just intentional and safe, I think.
Well, I know that I feel like you guys just kind of were touching on this with the localized AI, but I know that this is something you're interested in. You've been following Xavier with, not needing larger cloud models.
Yep.
And I've been kind of following this and like this gets like very technical for me to understand. But can you talk about I understand Apple is making some changes
Yeah.
for people who are like more concerned with like their data and getting off larger cloud models. Is that correct? Am I understanding it correctly?
So yes and no. So Apple is not concerned. Apple has accidentally stumbled across this. So a few years ago, Apple made a big switch from using Intel, AMD, like other like chip processors to make their CPUs and GPUs, and they started making them in-house. So that's when you started getting like the A series of like Apple chips for your phone. And then you started getting the M series they call it Apple Silicon, the M series for the laptops. And I think even some iPads, don't hold me on that. But basically every Apple device from your AirPods to your phones to your laptops, they all have like Apple Silicon in them now. And basically what Apple has done, they have built an architecture with a CPU, which is like the thinking part of the computer, and then the GPU, which is what is doing all the work when it comes to blockchain, video gaming. Everything really matters about GPUs now. They built an architecture where they're all on like the same deck. So you can have like the CPU and then they can just stack GPUs on top of it to make it more powerful if they want. The big unlock with this is because their chips have gotten so efficient with the hardware and the software that now people are realizing that you can just load like these local LLMs on these Apple devices. Big thing was in the last week, they've announced not one, not two, but three new Apple devices that start at $600. So a new iPhone, a new MacBook, and then a new iPad. And people are like, oh, dude, like I can buy this $600 computer and I can run like a fuck ton of OpenClaw on this, right? Or I
Well,
can run like llama models on this, right? And OpenClaw is the big unlock here because people realize that you get more out of having a local model that has access to your actual machine than paying Anthropic or OpenAI
mm,
20 or 100 or $200 a month for a cloud model where it's siphoning off all your data. It doesn't have access to your actual files. It's like a whole thing. So it's better security, better functionality, and it's basically free. So that's a big thing. And it's not even just the current Apple devices that came out. You guys don't know this, but old Apple hardware is sold out everywhere for Mac Minis, old MacBook Airs, all of this, because people are buying them, loading OpenClaw or Llama or whatever onto them, and then setting them up on like a remote server that they can like hit from a phone. So they have like a little app, just like GPT, right? But instead of it going off to OpenAI's cloud, is going to an instance running on their Mac Mini at home.
okay.
So that's like a big deal that's happening with personal AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of that as well because I follow a lot of that open AI source, and it's just everyone is
Yeah.
buying the Mac Mini, just running
Yeah,
it all from
they're
home.
sold out everywhere. And
Yeah,
then if you
it's
look for them on eBay, they're like going for way more money than they're normally should be going for. So that's a big deal. And then OpenClaw is just so easy to install it. There were other kind of local AI models that you can get. This might have been the first like multi-use agent. The rest of them are more like kind of like chatbots. And then also the other ones were like kind of like a order of magnitude harder to install. Where with OpenClaw, you can do that in like 3 to 5 minutes. It's not very hard to get OpenClaw on your computers.
yeah, because if I understand correctly, LangChain is also, the Llama, all of those, it's kind of just
Yeah,
different.
that's more like agent orchestration. But yeah, all of those are
Okay.
like the same thing. There are ways for you to kind of manage agents or load them into a different machine, etc., without having to go through something like Claude or OpenAI. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, we don't have a lot of more time left, but I know that, one topic that I want to end on that's making the rounds is this new Harvard business study about AI leading to brain fry. 1 in 7 AI using employees have said they've experienced AI brain fry, which is like a funny way of saying that they have cognitive overload from using various tools. And also, these tools are creating more work for people. I'm seeing this with the adoption of some tools with a client of mine. And just one is with the understanding that adopting some of these tools to automate some processes comes with a learning curve. There's some, you have to improve the processes. Your initial outputs will probably not be that great. However, I think that people are also trying to um, spin their wheels a little too much. And there's a lot of marketing around this tool is going to solve this problem and this problem and this problem. I think there's a wide range of how companies are pushing adoption. We talked last week about some are like there you've got the companies that are turning a blind eye but the employees are getting ahead using AI on their own dime but they're making it work for them. And then you've got companies that are like force feeding AI tools that are just creating more work. People are resenting them. People are scared that they're being used to train AI that's going to replace them. So they
Yeah.
resent it. They don't want to use it or they want to, and it's just not working for them because it's a very like one size fits all approach across different departments and fields. So with that said, like I don't think there's an easy solution. I'd like to say, this is where the experts come in. And if you're trying to start something new, jumpstart a project, need a new process or system, how do you guys think you can eliminate this problem? And I think at the end of the day, it's a conversation of like, how can you really make AI effective and not a bot?
Yeah, I think this goes back also to like our conversation earlier about, using it intentionally and going slow, because there is that sort of push to just quickly adopt it. But what they're finding is that, when you adopt one AI agent, your productivity, things go up. When you adopt a second one, it goes up again. But the minute you start adopting a third, a fourth, everything sort of crashes because you've always need the human oversight. And this is where this study is really interesting, is that because of that mental overload, of just adopting the tools and using the tools to very quickly produce output, there's not enough brain power. Literally, they're calling it, brain fry. You don't have enough left over, enough mental juice left over in order to discern and judge and really oversee like what the AI is producing and to keep keep everything in line. Because the other thing that I thought was quite interesting about this topic, and it kind of links in, is the idea of cognitive sovereignty. Basically, that you are the author of your own thinking, right? And it's crucial to maintain that through the use of AI, because what a lot of people realize is if you're really deep in the workflow, and I think we've all experienced this to a degree, you're really deep in that workflow, with the model, be it Claude or whatever, there's a point where you don't always realize when you've stopped steering the wheel and you're just becoming very reactionary to what it's producing. So it produces something and you react, and so it goes, and you've suddenly realized, like, oh, when was the last time I checked what assumptions it's making, checked for scope creep, check. And so because everyone is really going so quickly with these adoptions, by the time you get to that stage where you need to check the output, you're exhausted. And so you're not doing that oversight properly. And I think this is where it's like where, less is more, going slower, being more intentional. You get less out of it the more you expand into these tools. So I think that's what people really have to watch out for, is don't burn out your own human discernment, judgment, and thinking on just using the tool and then have nothing left over to really examine the output or the method by which you got to that output. Because that's where things really go awry, especially when you don't have, software engineering expertise like Xavier does. It takes us a lot longer in order to see where things have gone awry in the process. And so, yeah, I think I think this is what we've sort of said the whole sort of, talking today, is be intentional, slow down, and really be mindful as you go through and watch your own brain during these processes to make sure that you are still steering the wheel.
Yeah, I agree.